I'm probably going to get in trouble for this when I get home today. But I'm kind of excited about this. I have picked out the people that I want my kids, Ben and Abby, to marry. And I'm excited about this. I'm tempted to tell you who I've picked out for them, but I have a feeling they wouldn't let me leave here alive. So I'll be satisfied to just say that the people I have selected for them are perfect. They're perfect. They have all the qualities that I want in my future kids-in-law, and I'm sure that they will be very happy together for the rest of their lives. I'm excited. I just need to figure out now how to get them together. But that's the easy part, right? That's the easy part. I just have to convince them to love the people that I have selected for them. So, any ideas on how to do that? How do you get two people to love each other? I mean, there must be a way, right? There's got to be a way. There must be like a spell or love dust or something. Nothing? I mean, I suppose, I've been thinking this through, and I suppose one idea is for me to trust that they will pick out good partners for themselves when the time is right, and that I don't need to be setting them up at this point. But I don't like that idea. I want to have a hand in this. So if you've got some ideas, would you please let me know? Write them on the blue cards if you've got ideas on how I can set my kids up. Many a parent has wished that they could pick out the partner for their kid. They wish that especially when they watch their kids sometimes make questionable decisions, right? Unfortunately, we don't really get to make that call. We don't get to pick out our partner for our kids. Sometimes we even have trouble picking out the partners for ourselves, right? I mean, we choose who we date, we choose who we marry, but we don't really get to choose who we fall for, right? You don't really decide that. You don't go look through a list of people with different qualities and find the one that has the right qualities and circle that and say, there we go. That's the one I'm going to fall in love with. It doesn't work that way, right? We don't control our emotions. We control what we do with our emotions, but I don't just decide who I'm going to love and who I'm going to hate and who I'm going to fear, who I will trust, who I will like, who I will dislike. I don't pick that, right? Isn't this true? I don't choose my emotions. So knowing this, here's my question. Who does Jesus think he is when he tells me to love my enemy? Who does he think he is? The nerve. Last week Stan talked to us about worshiping God with our minds. And he talked a bit about our ability to choose the things that we think about, choose the things that we fill our minds with, and how we use that to worship God with our minds, not just our hearts or our souls or our strength, but how we worship God with our minds. And one of the passages that he mentioned was from Matthew 5:44, where Jesus says, "But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." All right, and Jesus says the same thing in Luke chapter 6, which we read just a little bit ago. He says this to the crowd of people that are gathered around listening. And Stan said last week, he said that verse, his experience with that verse, really changed his faith and changed the way that he handled anger. And I was listening to him last week, and I thought, man, I wish I was better at that. I sure wish I was better at that. Because Stan talked about how he would pray for his enemies, and he said he would pray for them to be filled with the Holy Spirit, and he would pray for them to be blessed and pray for God to meet their needs. And I thought, man, you know what I pray for my enemies? I'm not going to tell you, but it's not the same as what Stan prays. But apparently, according to Jesus, it should be. It should be. I can't control who I like and who I don't like. I can't control that. I can't pick out who my enemies are going to be. But according to what this says, as a follower of Jesus, the expectation is that I will love my enemy. And just in case I get this idea, well, maybe I'm misunderstanding what Jesus is saying here. Maybe it's just I'm not interpreting this correctly. Well, Paul says basically the same thing in Romans chapter 12. He says, bless those who persecute you. Don't curse them. Pray that God will bless them. Come on. I mean, this is not fun. I don't want to hear this. I would like to take my pen and just kind of cross those parts out of the Bible. But the fact that these are in there tells me that I've got a choice in this. I can choose to love my enemies. I can choose to bless those who persecute me, not to curse them, but pray that God will bless them. And that means that I have a choice here. I choose to obey what Jesus says, or else I'm choosing to disobey. I mean, it comes down to that. You know, if I have a choice, if I can choose to love my enemies, then I'm either choosing to obey Jesus or I'm choosing to disobey. And it goes back to that truth, right? I can't control my emotions. I can't control what I feel. But I do have control over what I do with my feelings, or how I respond to my feelings. And the expectation, the understanding is that as I live as a Christian in the world, God absolutely wants me to exercise some control over what I do with my emotions. I can't just let my emotions run wild. I control how I respond to them. And where this really comes into play, where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, is in the way that I choose to treat people that I don't really like. You know, the way I choose to treat people that rub me the wrong way, the way I choose to treat my enemies. That's where this really comes into play. And the command that's given is to love your enemies. Not to like them, not to become friends with them, but to love them. And so I've been thinking about this. I'm thinking about the people in my life that I don't particularly like. And believe it or not, there are people in my life that I don't particularly like. Not anyone here. I like you guys, you know, for the most part. But there are people, you know, that rub me the wrong way. There are people. And so I think about this, and when I think about this command to love my enemies, there's two big questions that come into my mind. Why in the world would Jesus ask us to do this? Why should I love my enemies? And how in the world am I supposed to do it? You know, and I look at those two questions, I'm like, I don't know which one of those is easier to answer. Why do you love your enemies, and how do you do it? Those are both hard questions, but if I'm going to love my enemies, if you're going to love your enemies, we need to know why we're being expected to do this, and we need to know how to do it. So when you look at the first question, why? Why should I love my enemies? I think there's two reasons that Jesus wants us to do this. There's two reasons why. And the first reason that he wants us to love our enemies is that it helps us to develop a sense of trust in God. Why does Jesus want us to love our enemies? It helps us to learn to develop a sense of trust. This is what Paul says in Romans 12. He says, "Dear friends, never take revenge. Leave that to the righteous anger of God. For the scriptures say, I will take revenge. I will pay them back, says the Lord." And I read that and I thought about that. I thought, you know, I can't control the people I like or dislike. I can't control that. I also don't control the people that I trust. I can't control who I trust. Trust is not like a switch that you flip on and off. Trust is something that is developed. I develop trust in certain people that are there for me, people that encourage me, people that build me up, people that are consistent. You don't just turn it on and off, you develop it. And so when Jesus says to love our enemies, he's giving us a way to develop a sense of trust in God, and particularly in God's justice. You know, I look around and I don't like the fact that bad people seem to get away with a lot of stuff. I don't like that. That rubs me the wrong way, that drives me nuts. But when it says here that God will be the one to take revenge, that God will pay them back, that it's not up to me to enact justice on people. When it says that, I can choose to believe this. I can choose to believe that God has his eyes open, that nothing escapes his sight, and to begin to develop this sense of trust that at some point God will Give good people what they deserve and bad people what they deserve. It's not up to me to decide who to punish and how to punish. I'm not in charge of that. I am in charge of loving people and trusting that God will deal with the things that need to be dealt with. So why does Jesus want me to love my enemies? It helps me begin to develop a sense of trust that God will take care of the things that need to be taken care of, that he's got things under control. And that frees me up to focus on the things that I can control. Okay? So why does Jesus want me to love my enemies? It helps me develop a sense of trust in God. The other reason that Jesus wants me to love my enemies is that it helps me to become a certain kind of person. It helps me to become a changed person. It helps me to become a different person. Don't let evil conquer you, but conquer evil by doing good, Paul says. Don't let evil conquer you. You conquer evil by doing good. Jesus says, you must be compassionate just as your Father is compassionate. And I like these verses. I like these because they both imply that you and I, we have a lot of control over the type of people that we are becoming. Be compassionate. Conquer evil. You have control over the kind of person that you are becoming. And the expectation, the goal, the hope is that we are becoming more and more and more like Jesus, who is the picture of goodness, the picture of compassion. That's our goal. Our goal is to begin to change who we are so that we look more and more like him. And I admit, I'm not there. I am not there yet. I'm not even close. But listen, every time I love my enemy instead of hating him, every time I choose to pray for my enemy, every time I do something that helps someone that I don't like, every time I do that, that does a little bit to change me into someone that is more loving, someone that is more compassionate, someone that looks more like Jesus. And that's the goal, right? Why does Jesus want me to love my enemies? Because that's what he did. That's what he did. And if I want to look like him, I need to reflect what he did to the world. And again, I'm not very good at this yet. I don't do a great job. But every single day, I can do something little to determine the kind of person that I am becoming. Every day we can do that. And loving our enemies goes a long way towards determining the kind of person that you become. Does that make sense? You guys understand this? So why does Jesus want us to love our enemies? It doesn't sound like a real nice thing, but why? It helps us develop a sense of trust in God, and it helps determine the kind of people that we are becoming. The other big question is, how do you do it? How do you love your enemies? And I don't know that this question is any easier to answer. But last week when Stan was talking about loving his enemies, he said that praying for his enemies, when he started praying for his enemies, it did a lot to change his faith. And I think that's a great place to start, is begin to pray, actively pray for your enemies. You know, it's hard, maybe even impossible for me to harbor hatred in my heart for someone and pray for God to bless them at the same time. You know, as I pray for them and love them, it pushes the hatred out. And that's why Jesus says to pray for them. Pray for them. Now, here I will admit, this is what I've known this for a long time, right? I've known this, pray for your enemies. So what I used to pray was, God, I want you to take care of my enemies. But I meant that in like come on, God, take care of them good. Right? And I'm not really praying for my enemies there. I'm praying against my enemies there. But when Jesus says, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, he's giving us the first step in loving our enemies. You don't just talk, you don't just use your lips to say, you know, God bless our enemies. It is pray it. Authentically pray it. If you want to love them, pray for them. Okay? The next step in praying for your enemies is a bit harder, though. And it's do something to actually help and bless your enemies. Do something to actually bless them. I don't like this. All right, I really wish that I could just kind of tear these passages out of my Bible. But when Paul says, if your enemies are hungry, feed them. If they're thirsty, give them something to drink. When he says that, when Jesus says, lend to them without expecting to be repaid, when they say these things, there's a reason these are there. You know, when you actually do things that help your enemies out, help people that you don't like, it ensures that you are actually looking out for people regardless of how you feel about them. You're not letting your feelings determine whether or not you help people. And this is, I know this is hard. This is hard, and I don't want to do it. You know, there's days when I don't want to exercise. I like to exercise overall, but there's certain days when I just feel tired and I feel grumpy and I don't want to do it. On those days, you know what? I try to make myself move and go work out. I try to make myself, because I've got in my mind an image of who I am trying to become. Someone that is healthy, someone that is stronger, and I know that part of me getting there depends on me pushing through these hard days when I don't want to do it. And so I have to make myself do it because I know who I am trying to become. Loving your enemies is the same way. I mean, there's no doubt that Jesus and Paul, they knew that what they're telling us to do is hard. You know, they knew that. They knew that this is not easy for us to do. This goes against what we naturally want to do. But listen, guys, left to our own natural devices, we'd be up a creek. I mean, that's why we're in church, right? We're in church because we acknowledge a reliance on God. We need Him. We need His guidance. We've tried to be who we want to be, and it doesn't work. So now we need to try to be who He wants us to be. We want to look like Jesus, and part of looking like Him means going beyond the things that are easy for us to do. You can't just stop at the things that are easy for you to do. If you love only those who love you, why should you get credit for that, Jesus asks. Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good only to those who do good to you, why should you get credit? Even sinners do that much. That's the easy stuff. Liking the people who like you back, that's easy. And he's right. He's right? I mean, if we want to walk with Christ, the goal is to look like Him, is to become like Him. And there's nowhere in the Bible or anywhere else that says that's going to be an easy process. Nowhere does it say that it's going to be easy to transform into someone that looks like Christ. It doesn't say that at all. You want to look like Him? Love your enemies. How do you love your enemies? Choose to pray for them. Choose to do something to help them. This is how to do it. Now, there's no guarantee that once you do this, you'll feel good about them. There's no guarantee that suddenly you'll become friends with them. But you know what? That's not really the point. That's not the purpose. You have zero control over your enemy's emotions. You have no control over the way they respond to you or the way they respond to life. You have no control. You do have control over the kind of person you become. You have control over the way you turn out. We don't love our enemies to change them. We love our enemies to change us. I love the idea that I can somehow influence other people. You know, that's why I'm sure that's why I want to try to pick out my kids' spouses, you know, and think that I can help make people's decisions for them. But that's not my job. That is not my job. And nowhere in the Bible does God ever imply that it is my job to change people. It is my job to love people and change myself. And a huge part of that is changing the way that I treat people that I don't really like. The first step in that is to pray for them. So I want you to think about that person that you don't really like. Picture their face in your mind. Maybe there's more than one. Maybe there's multiple people that you don't really like. People that rub you the wrong way. People that have hurt you before. People that have hurt your family. People that have undermined you. We all have people like this. Every one of us. We all have people like this, and it's hard to pray for them. It's hard to do that. But this is the first step in loving our enemies and becoming like Jesus. So if you're not ready to do this, I understand. But if you're ready to do this, picture that person in your mind. Just close your eyes and picture that person. And if you're ready to do it, just in your heart and in your mind, just pray this after I pray it. Just pray for them. Father God, bless this person and help them. Be their guide and help me to love them as you love them. Meet their needs today and fill them with your joy. And you know what? It'd be easy enough for us to stop there. Just pray for them. Just stop there. But we're not supposed to stop there. We're not supposed to look a little like Jesus. The big challenge for you and for me this week now is to do something to bless them, to help them. It doesn't have to be a big thing, and it doesn't have to be in person. Just do something little, do something anonymous even, to help them out. And that, again, that may not heal the relationship, but that's not the point. It will heal you, and that's what you can control. I'm going to invite you to pray with me as our ushers come up this morning.